Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Ages of Chaos. Quite a fun one this time round. We're going to hop away from the 41st millennium for a little while and go on over to the mortal realms, the Age of Sigmar side of things, which we haven't visited for quite a while. And it's kind of a shame, really. You may have heard us bemoaning on the Principal Fluff and Hammer podcast that Games Workshop aren't really promoting AOS as well as they have been in its previous incarnations. It seems to have hit like a narrative stop after the utter brilliance of the Broken Realms. The Broken Realms books, as you well know, they were our favourite campaign books that have ever been. They were brilliantly written. They moved the setting on in significant ways. They changed the status of races and armies within the game and the setting. They were brilliant. But after the incredible promise of the release of 3.0 with the Dawnbringer Crusades, which is a brilliant concept, by the way, all of that stuff going on, it's just juddered to a halt. And it's a real shame, because Age of Sigmar 3.0, it's a really good game system. It's a really good game system. It's probably one of the best versions of Age of Sigmar there have been. It works tremendously well for what it's trying to do. And not only that, but every single one of the battle tomes thus far has been brilliant. They've been utterly brilliant, particularly on the Chaos side of things. I mean, you've got your grand alliances in Sigmar. Obviously, you've got Order, you've got Chaos, you've got Destruction, and you've got Death. Every single battle tome has been golden. They've not only moved on the army within the setting in terms of the background, but they've enhanced them. They've made them much more fluid and interesting to play. And on the Chaos side, the last time we were here, we did the Maggotkin of Nurgle book, and that was amazing. That's a beautiful, beautiful tome. We now have one of my favourites. This one competes with the Hedonites of Slaanesh for me in terms of my favourite armies in Age of Sigmar. We've got the old classic, the Disciples of Tzeentch. Long-time fans of the Ages of Chaos will know that the Disciples of Tzeentch book really was the very first one in Age of Sigmar, way back when, that defined and ratified the position of the god-specific forces in Age of Sigmar. It wasn't the first of these books. I think the first of them was the Blades of Khorne, but it was the Disciples of Tzeentch that really set the tone and timbre for them, because every single one of these books has been brilliant. Every single one of them. What I love about the Disciples of Tzeentch more than anything is that there is sincere attempt to remove Tzeentch forces from what Chaos has classically always been in the fantasy setting. Now, in the ye old days of fantasy battle, most Chaos armies were pretty much the same. They had certain differences depending on what god they followed, but in terms of their constitution, they were always the same. It was always Chaos Knights, Chaos Warriors, Chaos Marauders on horseback, a few demon engines and things like that, like the Hell Cannon, and that was pretty much it. They were basically the same. Now, those kinds of armies, your ye old classic Chaos armies, have been relegated to the Slaves to Darkness. They are their own specific bespoke force, and they're very interesting and very good. And I'm getting that book very soon, by the way. I've got the big battle box on order. It's on its way. So when that arrives, I'll be doing that book too. But the god-specific armies, those dedicated to each of the Chaos powers, have become, in Age of Sigmar, their own distinct forces that are composed differently, that play differently, that are dynamically, aesthetically very, very, very far removed from one another. And nowhere is that more apparent than in the Disciples of Tzeentch. For one thing, in the background, the Disciples of Tzeentch have always been the most cultish of the Chaos powers. So, whereas most of the other forces, the Maggotkin of Nurgle, the Hedonites of Slaanesh, and the Blades of Khorne, they are more sort of nomadic, barbaric, they fight in great armies. The Disciples of Tzeentch are covens and cults within the cities of Sigmar, within the civilized world. The only other army that's similar to that is the Hedonites. The Hedonites kind of have a similar thing going on, but not to the same degree as these guys. They are these elaborate underground bodies, cults, and institutions that are often not even aware that they're serving Tzeentch. That the upper echelon, the lower echelons of the cult, are often, they don't realise that it is a cult dedicated to chaos. They think that it's like an intellectual or academic society or a philosophical or artistic movement or something like that. And it's only when the cult erupts into all-out war that their true colours are revealed, as it were. But it's fantastic. I love that about the cults of Tzeentch. They are these subtle manipulators. They're involved in the politics and the culture of the city-states and the cultures of the old world, of the mortal realms, rather. And I love that. The only thing that they've suffered from is that, unlike, say, the Hedonites of Slaanesh, which have a very definite sort of narrative thrust in terms of they were seeking the imprisoned Slaanesh. That was their entire goal. It was to find and release Slaanesh, and that lent them their narrative impetus, their dynamism. It meant that they were actively questing across the realms. The disciples of Tzeentch were a little bit more staid in their previous incarnations. They didn't have although they were working to undermine the roots of civilization in the old world and throw everything into anarchy and so on and so forth, they never really had a definite narrative thrust within the setting. Now, with this new book, they do. With the Disciples of Tzeentch 3.0, they've tried to give them make them a real threat, to give them an agenda, an overarching agenda that's a threat to the entire realms. And what they've done is they've linked them to the Dawnbringer Crusades. So the Dawnbringer Crusades are spreading out from the points of civilization in the old world, and they are bringing the worship of Sigmar with them. They're bringing the stability, quote-unquote, of law and order to the realms, and they're driving back the forces of chaos, death, and destruction. And they're establishing city-states at particular points in the old world. So civilization is spreading as the antithesis of chaos, and most of the Chaos Powers are not fans of this. They don't like it. The only two that really do are Slaanesh and Slaanesh and Tzeentch. Tzeentch is very, very pleased, because wherever civilization flourishes, there is politics, there is culture, there are the systems by which Tzeentch and his worshippers thrive. And what they've noticed is that the cities of Sigmar tend to be established upon very particular points in the sort of metaphysical systems of the mortal realms. It's called the geomantic web. It's the unseen structure of magic that holds together the entirety of the mortal realms. And at certain points in the geomantic web, there are convergences of ley lines. The Seraphon have known about this for ages. It's just a natural part of creation insofar as they're concerned. But the disciples of Tzeentch have just learned about this. And they can not only tap into the geomantic web as a wellspring of magic, they can work to unravel it and throw entire cities into absolute chaos and anarchy. And that's what they're working to do. They are working to insidiously unravel these knots that hold reality together, to collapse it into the chaos that gives Tzeentch such pleasure. So now they have this incredible dynamism going on, where they're a genuine threat. They are working actively within the setting to do something profound and amazing, which could in and of itself, maybe at the culmination of this edition of Age of Sigmar, maybe they'll succeed, or maybe they'll half succeed in the way that Nagash did with the Necroquake, or something to that effect. It's a great little narrative hook, and I've got to say, I love it. I love it to bits. Beyond that, not much has changed. They are pretty much the same as they were. The background is pretty much the same. There's a great emphasis in here on Tzeentch's presence within Charmon, the realm of metal, because of course the realm of metal is all about it's the alchemic realm. It's about the shift and the transition between one state and another, and as a result, that's where Tzeentch thrives. So Tzeentch has succeeded in conquering and perverting a great swathe of Charmon, and most of the greatest cults are based there. Beyond that, there's not much that has changed. They are pretty much the same as they were, and that's all good. That's all good. I've always loved the background for these guys. The fact that they are much more insidious and subtle than the other hosts of chaos, the other cult legions and whatnot. I love that to bits. And that aesthetically, they're so far removed from other Chaos forces. They are one of my favourites. There's no doubt of that. In terms of the way they play, this book, it's clear that what they've done, one of the big problems with these cult books, these god-specific books in previous editions, is that they didn't balance out with one another. And I don't mean that in terms of game balance, I just mean that in terms of structure. So there was no standardized format between them. So one book had its own format, another book had its own format, and the other had another format. So they immediately out of the gate, they were unbalanced. One book always had more than the others. And in fact, in the last edition, it was the Disciples of Tzeentch that had way more going on, way more special rules, way more agendas and missions that you could perform. It had so much going on. And that made it, not only did it make it slightly unbalanced, that's another problem that the Disciples of Tzeentch have. They've always been really powerful. Certain builds of the Disciples of Tzeentch in games of AOS, they're a bit like the Votan in 40k, or like the Imperial Guard, the Astra Militaria are now. They can be rather OP, as it were. But what they've done with this book is they've refined it down a little bit. Most of the special rules are actually the same. They all have the same battle traits. They've got their Masters of Destiny, where you roll 9 dice at the beginning of the game, and they are your Destiny dice, and you can use those rolls at particular points in the game instead of rolls that you make. It's really cool. They've got a new special rule which is really interesting, which is Arcane Armies. And this is absolutely brilliant. And again, it is quite powerful, this. What it means is, at the beginning of the game, one of your wizards can, for free, without a roll being made, gratis summon an endless spell to the battlefield, just like that. And that is pretty damn powerful, I've got to say. That's a very nice freebie at the beginning of the game. Most people are going to be going for what's it called? The book with the eyes? Is it the Tome of Eyes or something? Yeah, because that is a wonderful buffing spell for your wizards in the game. So most people are going to be going with that. That's a lovely thing. The Locus of Change is still the same. It's just been refined a little bit. Your change covens, so you've got ways of customizing your army to represent one of the different covens and cults that exist out there, or one of the demon hosts of Tzeentch. There's less of them now. They've been refined down so they're not so complicated, and they are equivalent to what you find in the Maggotkin of Nurgle book. So that is actually, even though you've lost a few bits and pieces here and there, it's incidental, it really is, and it makes playing and composing the army much simpler. You've got your Summon Demons of Tzeentch, so this is cool actually, this is fun. You receive fate points throughout the battle, and all of the god-specific books have this, and they're all different depending on the nature of the god and demons in question. So the Demons of Tzeentch, you gain fate points every time a casting roll is successful and a spell is not unbound, basically. And that's from your side and from the enemy side. And given how reliant on magic most games of Age of Sigmar are, you're going to be accruing those pretty fast. There are ways of also just getting fate points by casting certain spells, using certain items and whatnot. So that's really cool. You're going to be able to summon demons to your cause. And this is particularly good with the Guild of Summoners. The Guild of Summoners are one of the more interesting change covens in this book. They have the ability, basically, Lords of Change, normally it takes a long time to summon a Lord of Change, basically. You need 30 fate points to summon a Lord of Change, which is a lot. It's going to take a long while. In a Guild of Summoners army, the first Lord of Change costs, I think, 9 points or 19 points or something like that, which is a steal. It's an absolute steal. And then the cost goes up incrementally, but it's always cheaper than it normally would be. So in a Guild of Summoners army, you can have multiple Lords of Change running around. And given how powerful Lords of Change are in this game now, that's pretty damn good. And also as a modelling, as an army, if you've got multiple Lords of Change, that's going to look great. So colourful, so much fun. One of the other new special rules is Legions of Chaos, which is the same as it was in the Maggotkin of Nurgle. You can take a certain number of Slaves to Darkness or Beasts of Chaos in this army without it impacting upon the special rules or your ability to take certain items and stuff like that, you know? It's a really, I mean, it makes building armies in Age of Sigmar really fun. Really fun. You can customize them to your heart's desire. You can have pretty much what you like in a Chaos army. And that it's a lovely thing. It makes me sad that Age of Sigmar is not as popular as it should be. I've got to say, I've never been as interested in the fantasy battle setting as I have in the science fiction setting, as in 40k. But I've got to say, the Age of Sigmar game at the moment is really good fun. You've got your standard number of command traits, and you've got two types. You've got one for the mortals and one for the demons, which is really cool. You've got, again, the same with the artifacts of power and the demonic treasures. They're all, most of them are based around casting, obviously. They're based around making your casters better wizards. That's what it's all about. They are one of, alongside the Lumineth, they are one of, magically, the most powerful armies in the game. You are going to be casting, and you're going to be getting multiple mortal wounds per turn, per magic phase. And that's what makes them so interesting. That's what makes them so powerful. 2 spell laws, as before, one that's for the mortal and arcanites, and one that's for the demons. Very, very nice. You've got your different change covens, all of which have been refined down massively. They're pretty much the same as they were before, but they've only got one special rule now, which makes it much easier to use them. The ones that are probably going to be the most popular are the aforementioned Guild of Summoners, which is insane. It's 9 fate points for the first Lord of Change, so you're going to be able to summon a Lord of Change in the first few turns. That's pretty mad. That's pretty mad. The Pyrophane cult is amazing. The sole agenda of the Pyrophane cult is the utter immolation of the mortal realms. They wish to engulf Akshian, warp fire to melt Shaman, to burn away the mists of Shyish, and turn glorious Azir to ash. The flames they send propagate fast, feeding on strife as true fire feeds on kindling. Some even walk as an inferno themselves. So the way this works, they've got a special rule called Arrows of Tzeentch, and what it means is every time your Kyric Acolytes use their Sorcerous Bolts, you roll a dice every time any wounds are caused, and on a 5+, you do an additional die 3 wounds. So you load up with Kyric Acolytes, which you're probably going to be doing anyway because they're just such a really good little troops choice. And you're going to be doing multiple long-range wounds and mortal wounds. It's really damn good. It's really good, actually. Yeah, the path to glory is fantastic in this book. There's a lot of fun to be had. There's bespoke battle plans and missions. They've refined down massively the War Scroll Battalion. So there are 2 big War Scroll Battalions that are made up of miniature War Scroll Battalions. There's the Fate Legion, which is the demons, and there's the Arcanite cult, which is the mortals. And they are really easy to use, really easy to put together, and give some very interesting benefits. So the Fate Legion, which is the demon one, that has the Storm of Demonic Fire. So great is the roiling tide of warp fire surrounding Tzeentch's demonic hosts that to merely stand in the demon's presence is to risk being set alight. Those who burn swiftly can be reckoned as the lucky ones. At the end of the charge phase, roll 1 dice for each enemy unit within 9 inches of any units from this battalion. On a 6, that enemy unit suffers die 3 mortal wounds. So, basically, it's a way of getting a minor advantage in the charge phase, because demons of Tzeentch are not necessarily that great in close combat, so that's a way of getting mortal wounds off immediately. For the Arcanite cult, it's the Boon of Mutation. Enemies of an Arcanite cult are under the constant threat of mutation, the unluckiest of them ending up transmogrified into a Zarngor. That sounds alright to me. I like Zarngor. They've got feathers and beaks and they look great. I'm all in for it. And they've got like luminous skin. They're brilliant. At the end of the charge phase, roll a dice for each enemy unit within 3 inches of any units from this battalion. On a 6, that unit suffers die 3 mortal wounds, so it's the same as the Fate Legion. If any models are slain by this ability, before removing the first slain model, you can add 1 model to a friendly Zarngor host. So it's a way of not only inflicting mortal wounds, but of boosting Zangor hosts as well. In terms of the actual war scrolls, everything has been simultaneously refined to make it easier to use, but also boosted massively. Kairos Fate Weaver here, he is an absolute beast. I mean, in terms of magic, the only things that are better than him are things like Teclis and Nagash, the god tier monsters. He is an absolute beast. He knows 3 spells. He knows all the spells from the Tzeentch demon table. He can cast 3, he can unbind 3, he can fly. He's got the Beacon of Sorcery, so he adds 1 to his casting, dispelling rolls and unbinding rolls. And also, he gives that benefit to friendly Tzeentch wizards around him. He can steal the spells that he dispels. He's got his Oracle of Eternity ability, which is really, really cool. Basically, you can add to your destiny dice with this, which is a brilliant ability. His mastery of magic is mad. So basically, when you make a casting, unbinding, or dispelling roll for this unit, you can change the lowest die 6 to match the highest die 6. So he's hardly ever going to fail. He's hardly ever going to fail casting. He's an amazing character, is Kairos. Love him. And the Lord of Change ain't much different, to be honest. It's got most of these abilities. It's just not quite as punchy. It doesn't have quite as many boons. Almost everything has been boosted just a little bit. The horrors have been refined a little bit more. So you've still got the spell, the split ability, but you have to choose at the beginning of the battle which one you want. So you can either have them split, or you can have a rule called Petty Vengeance where they explode and deal mortal wounds. It's brilliant. Absolutely love it. Flamers, Gaunt Summoners, oh my god, Gaunt Summoners now are amazing. You're going to be taking these guys. Not only are they brilliant spellcasters, but they have these abilities. They've got the Lords of the Silver Towers. Basically, once per battle at the end of a phase, you can pick one enemy hero that is within 9 inches of this unit and that made an attack that targeted this unit in that phase or caused any mortal wounds to this unit with an ability or spell in that phase. Okay? Even if the wounds or mortal wounds were negated, if you do so, roll 2 dice 6. If the roll is greater than the wounds characteristic of that hero, the hero is removed. There's no save, there's nothing. They are spirited away to the Silver Tower, and that is it. They're done. It's only once per battle, but if you plan that right and you get it off, you can disrupt the opponent like you wouldn't believe. They've also got the Silvered Portal, which basically means that they can set up units in the Silver Tower before the battle, and then those units can arrive basically via the equivalent of Deep Strike. It's really, they are amazing. Gaunt Summoners, you're going to want a couple of them. Magisters they are exactly what they should be. They are the big Tzeentch champions. They are your Tzeentch Chaos Lords, I suppose, in many respects. Very, very cool. Curselings, there's a new model for the Curselings, and these guys are brilliant too. They are one of the better spellcasters, for one thing, and they can also, again, nick the spells of their opponents with a spell called Glean Magic, which is really naughty. Very naughty indeed. Things like your Zangor. The Zangor, again, they are your punchier, tougher units. They've got 2 wounds apiece, which is really good. They've got a 5+ save, which is really good. They've got ways of evading mortal wounds, which is amazing. They have a ward save of 6+. It's very, very cool, I've got to say. Your Kyric Acolytes, cheap and cheerful. They are as they've always been. A little bit buffer now. A little bit buffer. But yeah, it's a really, really wonderful piece of work, this. I can see Tzeentch armies being really, really popular in the fantasy setting. Not only for their aesthetics, because they look incredible. They look unlike any other Chaos army out there. They're big, they're colourful, they're extravagant, they're elaborate. But they play in such a weird, roundabout, bizarre way. And that makes them fun. That makes them fun. One of the things that distinguishes them is they're almost exclusively long range. You don't really want them in close combat if you can help it, because they're not very good at it. But they are an almost exclusively long range army. Almost everything in the army has a long range attack, barring, I think, what's he called, the Fate Master. I think he's the only thing in the entire book that doesn't have a long range attack, and he is your close combat muscle, I suppose, in many respects. He's basically a Tzeentch Chaos Lord on a disc of Tzeentch with a fire glaive, and also he has a lovely ability called Lord of Fate, which add 1 to wound rolls for attacks made by friendly disciples of Tzeentch units wholly within 9 inches of this unit. So yeah, he's a brilliant little buffing unit too. It's a wonderful book, I've got to say. It's so well put together. Everything feels considered. Everything feels like it has weight and worth. There are not redundant units in the book, and that is a wonderful thing. It means that putting together Tzeentch armies now in AOS is a barrel of laughs, and that's before we've even got the Slaves to Darkness book, and we have a look at what can be taken from that. That's coming up very soon, by the way, and I've got to tell you, scuttlebutt, the word on the underground is that the Slaves to Darkness book is something pretty special, so wait out for that one, my loves. Until next time, bye-bye!